Welcome to tonight's sleep story. Take a deep breath, close your eyes, and let go of the day. Allow yourself to relax and settle into a peaceful state as my voice gently guides you through a world of calm and tranquility. With each word, feel the tension slip away, leaving only relaxation and comfort. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. It is a quiet, crisp morning in the heart of the American colonies. The air is cool with the faintest scent of pine from the surrounding forests, and the ground beneath your feet feels soft with early spring dew. The year is 1775, and the world around you is on the cusp of revolution. The colonies, once subjugated to the distant rule of the British Crown, now stir with the whispers of rebellion. The tension is palpable, the air thick with the weight of history about to be made. As you stand at the edge of the small, bustling village, a figure in the distance catches your eye. A man, tall and sturdy, walks with a purpose. His gait is steady, yet there is an underlying weariness in his step, as though he is carrying a burden much heavier than his frame suggests. His name is George Washington, and his destiny, though not yet fully realized, will forever be entwined with the future of this new nation. In this moment, George Washington is a farmer, a landowner, and a respected leader in his community, but he is also a man who has been thrust into a role he never sought, a role that will demand sacrifices beyond what he can imagine. As he surveys the land around him, his thoughts are heavy with the responsibility that has been placed upon him. The colonies are on the brink of war, and Washington, a military leader with experience from the French and Indian War, is called upon to lead them against the might of the British Empire. But Washington is no ordinary man. He is not driven by the thirst for power, nor is he motivated by personal ambition. Instead, his heart beats with a quiet sense of duty. He is a man who believes in the cause of liberty, in the ideals of freedom that have begun to take root among the colonies. Yet, he does not consider himself a hero, nor does he desire the adulation that comes with such a title. He is, at his core, a reluctant leader, burdened by the weight of the trust that his fellow countrymen have placed in him. As the news of the conflict grows, Washington is called to serve as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. His appointment is not a decision made lightly. Washington knows the stakes are higher than any personal glory or fame could ever be. The colonies, fragile and fractured, face an empire that has long held dominion over them, and now they must stand together to fight for their independence. It is a war that will test every ounce of his resolve, every drop of his strength, and every piece of his character. In the days that follow, Washington prepares for the challenges ahead. The feeling of duty swells within him, pushing him to take on the mantle of leadership, despite his own misgivings. He knows that the road ahead will not be easy. He will face overwhelming odds, personal loss, and the constant specter of failure. But he also knows that the cause is just, and that if he does not step forward, others may falter in his stead. It is in this moment of quiet reflection, surrounded by the peacefulness of his land, that Washington begins to understand the true weight of his calling. The conflict ahead will be brutal, and many will question Washington's decisions, both on and off the battlefield. The road to independence is fraught with hardship, but it is one that Washington will walk with unwavering resolve. As he steps forward, leaving behind the comfort of his estate, he does so with the understanding that his leadership will not only shape the outcome of this war, but will also determine the future of a nation that has yet to find its place in the world. As Washington prepares for the coming storm, there is a sense of uncertainty in the air. The outcome of the revolution is far from certain. The British Army is one of the most formidable in the world, and the colonies, though united in their desire for freedom, are still a patchwork of disparate states, each with its own ambitions and concerns. Washington knows that in order to succeed, he must not only lead with strength and courage, but also with humility, recognizing that the road ahead will require more than just military prowess. It will require unity, patience, and a belief in something greater than himself. In the quiet moments before the storm, George Washington looks out over the land he loves. The future of this young nation is uncertain, but one thing is clear. He will do whatever it takes to fight for its future. The choice is no longer his. He is no longer just a man. but the leader of a revolution. And so, with one final glance at the peaceful landscape that has been his home, George Washington steps forward, ready to embrace the role that history has thrust upon him. The sun rises over the fields of Massachusetts, casting a soft golden light on the endless stretch of land. The air is crisp, and a slight breeze stirs the leaves of the trees as the early morning quiet settles over the town. The stage is set, and the tension is palpable. Across the colonies, the cry for freedom has reached a fever pitch, and the first real clash of arms has already begun. The American colonies, once under the shadow of the British Empire, now stand at the brink of war, a war that will determine the fate of their independence. In the distance, the sounds of distant cannon fire echo through the air, signaling that the conflict is no longer a distant thought, but an imminent reality. George Washington, recently appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, stands at the forefront of this revolutionary struggle, a man who has only recently stepped into the immense responsibility that his title demands. Though he feels the weight of the burden, there is a deep, unwavering conviction within him, a conviction that he must lead, not just for the sake of his fellow countrymen, but for the future of a nation yet to be born. The battle begins not with a single charge, but with small, incremental skirmishes. The British, led by General Thomas Gage, march through the colonies, confident in their military superiority. Their red coats gleam in the sunlight, and their movements are methodical, an army trained in the old ways of war. The colonists, on the other hand, are a ragtag group of farmers, tradesmen, and volunteers, armed with whatever they could muster. They lack the formal training and organization of the British, yet they fight with a fervor and determination born from a single unifying cause, the desire for independence. Washington's first challenge is not the enemy across the field, but the army he must command. The Continental Army is disorganized, poorly supplied, and demoralized. Many soldiers are volunteers, not professional fighters, and their loyalty to the cause is tempered by the hard realities of war. The task ahead seems insurmountable. The odds are stacked against them, but Washington, ever the strategist, sees something more in these men, something greater than just soldiers. He sees a group of individuals who, despite their inexperience and hardships, are united by a common goal. They are not just fighting for a cause, but for their future, their freedom. Washington's leadership is tested early. As he faces the first major battle of his command, the siege of Boston, the enormity of the situation begins to weigh on him. The British, well entrenched in the city, have the advantage, and the Continental Army is left with few options. Washington knows that a direct confrontation with the British could be disastrous, so he must find another way. His solution comes in the form of strategy. He orders a siege, cutting off the British supplies and reinforcements, waiting for them to tire, waiting for them to make a mistake. In the months that follow, Washington's army grows stronger, but so does the pressure on him. He is constantly faced with the harsh realities of war: the hunger, the sickness, the casualties. The soldiers, often without proper clothing or supplies, fight on, driven by the hope of victory and the belief that they are part of something far larger than themselves. But Washington knows that victory will not come easily. The war will be long and costly. His resolve is tested again and again, but he remains determined, guiding his troops with a quiet strength that becomes his trademark. Despite his frustrations, Washington never falters in his dedication to his soldiers and his cause. The first major victory for the Continental Army comes at the Battle of Trenton, after a daring surprise crossing of the Delaware River. The cold winter night is harsh, the ice cutting through the men's boots, but their resolve is stronger than the biting cold. With limited supplies and a dwindling force, Washington executes a brilliant, unexpected attack that leads to a much-needed victory. The triumph is not just tactical, it is symbolic. The American forces, once considered weak and disorganized, have struck a blow against the mighty British army, and Washington, though still a reluctant leader, is hailed as a hero. But Washington's victories come at a price. The war is far from over, and every battle brings with it new sacrifices. The pressure of leadership weighs heavily on his shoulders, and the strain of command is evident in the lines that have begun to appear on his face. Yet, with each challenge, he grows. and the men under his command grow with him. There is no time to rest, no time for doubt. Every decision, every action is a step toward the future of a nation that is still struggling to find its place in the world. The more Washington leads, the more he understands the true nature of warfare. It is not just about winning battles, it is about winning hearts and minds. He must inspire those who follow him, make them believe in the cause, and give them the courage to keep fighting, even when the odds seem insurmountable. His leadership is not defined by the victories he wins, but by the loyalty he inspires, the trust he builds, and the respect he earns from the men who march into battle at his side. Through the challenges, the victories, and the losses, Washington's leadership solidifies. He is no longer the reluctant leader he was when he first took command. He is now the commander the army looks to, the one who embodies the spirit of the revolution. The war is far from over, but Washington's commitment to the cause, to the soldiers who follow him, and to the dream of an independent nation is unwavering. As the days pass, the seeds of victory are being sown, not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts of the American people. Washington knows the road ahead will be long and difficult, but in the distance he can see the promise of a new world, one where freedom, justice, and independence will one day reign. And in that promise, he finds the strength to keep fighting, to keep leading, to keep believing. As the harsh winter winds howl across the desolate fields of Pennsylvania, the once proud Continental Army lies encamped at Valley Forge, a far cry from the triumphant days that had followed the victory at Trenton. The ground is frozen solid, and the trees, stripped of their leaves, stand like silent sentinels in the biting cold. The soldiers, clad in rags and torn coats, huddle together for warmth, their faces gaunt from the relentless strain of a war that has dragged on for longer than anyone had imagined. They are not yet defeated, but the weight of their suffering presses heavily on them. The hardships they endure in this bleak winter are unlike anything they have faced before. George Washington stands at the edge of the camp, gazing out over the horizon, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. His posture, though still strong, reflects the toll that the long months of war have taken on him. The responsibility of leading these men, of giving them hope when there seems to be none, has become an almost unbearable weight. Washington knows that the army is on the brink, not just of defeat, but of collapse. Morale is at an all-time low, desertions are common, and some of the soldiers are so sick from malnutrition and exposure that they can barely stand, let alone fight. The British, meanwhile, remain strong, well-supplied, and ready to strike at any moment. The valley around them, once a symbol of their resolve, now feels like a prison. The men are growing disillusioned, questioning the cause they are fighting for, questioning the leadership that has brought them here. The promise of independence seems more distant than ever. Washington, though exhausted, does not let this doubt show. He knows that if the army falters now, the revolution will die before it ever truly begins. He cannot, will not allow that to happen. Despite the dire situation, Washington never allows his faith in the cause to waver. He spends long hours in his tent, writing letters, seeking support from the Continental Congress, and organizing what little resources they have left. He knows that the soldiers under his command look to him not just for orders, but for reassurance. They need a reason to keep fighting, a spark of hope that will carry them through the darkness. Washington's letters are filled with calls for unity, for perseverance. He writes not just as a commander, but as a man who understands the burden of leadership, who feels the weight of his soldiers' suffering as if it were his own. One night, as the camp is cloaked in silence, Washington walks among the tents, his boots crunching in the snow. He stops to speak with his officers who have gathered around a small fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. Their conversation is grave, their voices tinged with uncertainty. Some suggest abandoning the camp and retreating further south to safer ground, but Washington, resolute, listens quietly, absorbing their concerns. When it's his turn to speak, his voice is steady but filled with the weight of his conviction. "We do not have the luxury of retreat," he tells them. "If we leave now, we lose not only this army, but everything we have fought for. We are here not just for ourselves, but for the future of this nation. We are not just soldiers, we are the heart of this revolution, and as long as we stand, so too does the cause of liberty. His words are not mere rhetoric. They come from a place deep within him, a place shaped by years of struggle, sacrifice, and unwavering belief in the ideals that have driven him to this point. He knows that the path forward will not be easy. The British will not simply fade into the background, but he also knows that to turn back now would be to dishonor everything they have fought for. The next morning, as the sun rises weakly through the clouds, the soldiers are called to arms. Their uniforms are tattered, their faces drawn, but they stand, not with the bravado of victory, but with the quiet resolve of men who know what is at stake. Washington leads them, not with the promise of immediate glory, but with the understanding that every step they take brings them closer to the dream they all share, a nation free from tyranny. As the days pass, there are small victories, supplies trickle in, and new training methods are introduced by Baron von Steuben, the Prussian officer who has joined the Continental Army. His drills, though harsh, begin to forge the ragtag group of soldiers into a more disciplined and unified force. Slowly but surely, the soldiers' morale begins to shift. The hardships of the winter are still there, but Washington's leadership, his calm assurance, begins to inspire them once more. And so, in the midst of the coldest winter the soldiers have ever known, Washington and his army begin to transform. They are no longer just a group of volunteers. They are a fighting force, united by the belief that their cause is just, that their sacrifices will not be in vain. Washington, though weary beyond measure, is more determined than ever. The promise of independence, once distant, is now closer than it has ever been. Each soldier who survives the winter, each day they endure, brings them closer to the victory they seek. As the spring begins to thaw the frozen ground, Washington knows that the road ahead will be long and difficult. But the battle at Valley Forge, though filled with suffering and sacrifice, has also given him something that cannot be taken away: hope. It is this hope, this unshakable belief in the cause, that will carry him and his army through the years of struggle that lie ahead. The night is cold and still, the sky blanketed with dark clouds, as the wind cuts sharply through the barren trees. The snow, which had been falling steadily since the early hours, now lies thick on the ground, muffling every sound in the camp. The silence of the night is broken only by the low murmur of soldiers preparing for the most daring mission they've undertaken. The moon hangs hidden behind the clouds, and the cold is biting, a cruel reminder of the hardships they've endured over the past months. But, despite the exhaustion, the fear, and the weight of the impossible mission ahead, there is an undeniable sense of purpose in the air, a feeling that something extraordinary is about to unfold. George Washington stands near the edge of the camp, his breath visible in the cold air, his figure a silhouette against the flickering light of the campfires. His face is tired, lined with the burden of leadership and the unrelenting weight of responsibility. The events of the past year have taken their toll. The losses, the hardships, the pressure to deliver results that seem always just out of reach. The Continental Army has been pushed to its limits, suffering through freezing winters, disease, and the constant threat of defeat. Yet, despite the endless setbacks, Washington knows that this moment is crucial, perhaps the most crucial of his life. This is the moment that could turn the tide of the revolution. Behind him, the men of his army are preparing for a mission unlike any other. Their uniforms are ragged, their spirits battered, but the sight of their commander stirs something deep within them. Washington has never been a man of grand speeches or fiery rhetoric. Instead, it is his quiet resolve, his ability to inspire loyalty in the face of overwhelming adversity, that has earned him the respect of his men. They trust him, and tonight they are ready to follow him into the unknown. The plan is simple, yet audacious. The Continental Army will cross the icy Delaware River under the cover of night, make a surprise attack on the Hessian forces in Trenton, New Jersey, and secure a much-needed victory. The element of surprise is their greatest weapon, and the cold, the darkness, and the treacherous river are their allies. Washington knows the risks are enormous. The river is swollen with ice, and the crossing itself is perilous. The soldiers are exhausted, ill-equipped, and struggling to stay warm, but there is no other choice. The fate of the revolution hangs in the balance. The boats are ready, their narrow wooden frames waiting on the banks of the river. The The soldiers, some barely able to hold their weapons steady in the bitter cold, begin to climb into the boats. The crossing will take hours, and they know that any delay could cost them the advantage they so desperately need. The men are quiet, save for the occasional whispered word of encouragement or command. As they begin their descent into the icy waters, the cold stings their faces, and the river, dark and swollen, feels like an insurmountable barrier. Yet they press on, each stroke of the oars bringing them closer to the unknown. The sound of water against the hull is the only noise they hear, the rhythmic motion of the rowers working in unison, as if their very lives depend on it. The journey across the Delaware River is grueling. The ice in the water slows their progress, and the cold cuts to the bone. But the men push forward, driven by the belief that their mission is one of greater importance than the chill that threatens to overtake them. Washington, in his own boat, is silent, his mind focused on the task ahead. He knows that failure is not an option. The fate of the American cause is in his hands, and he cannot afford to let his men down. As the boats continue to move through the dark waters, Washington reflects on the burden of command, the pressure to lead, to make the right decisions, and to bear the weight of his soldiers' lives. The crossing, which had seemed impossible just hours before, is completed. The men, cold and exhausted, make their way onto the shores of New Jersey, their faces set with determination. They know that time is against them. The element of surprise is their only hope, and they must act quickly before the Hessian forces have a chance to regroup. The men begin to march, their footsteps muffled by the snow beneath them, as they move toward Trenton with a singular purpose. As they approach the town, Washington gives the order to advance. The streets of Trenton are eerily quiet, the town asleep under the cover of darkness. The Hessians, though experienced soldiers, are caught off guard. The attack comes swiftly, decisively. The Continental Army, tired and cold, fights with the ferocity of men who know that this battle, this moment, could change everything. The roar of battle echoes through the streets, the sounds of musket fire and shouting filling the air. In the early hours of the morning, as the first light of dawn begins to break over the horizon, the battle ends, the Hessians are defeated, and the Continental Army has secured a much-needed victory. The victory, though hard won, is a turning point in the Revolution. Washington, though exhausted, stands tall, surveying the scene. The men around him are jubilant, their spirits lifted by the success of their daring mission. For the first time in months, there is hope. The American cause, which had seemed on the brink of collapse, now has new life. The victory at Trenton is not just a tactical win, it is a symbolic victory, one that proves the American army can stand against the mighty British forces, and that the Revolution can survive. As the sun rises over the battlefield, Washington stands still for a moment, allowing the weight of the victory to wash over him. This is not just a victory for him or for his army. It is a victory for the future of America. He knows that the road ahead will be long, and the battles will only get harder. But for the first time in a long while, he feels a sense of hope. The revolution is far from over, but tonight they have taken one step closer to their ultimate goal, freedom. The cold wind cuts through the woods of Valley Forge, the trees standing stark and bare against a grey sky. The air is thick with the chill of winter, and the ground is hard, frozen beneath the weight of snow and ice. It is here, in this desolate landscape, that George Washington's army finds itself once more. Not in the field of battle, but in a war of attrition, fighting against nature itself as much as the enemy. The long, brutal winter has arrived, and it feels as though the army's very will to survive is being tested. Washington, standing at the edge of the camp, surveys the scene before him. Rows of makeshift huts, men huddled in groups around small fires, their faces drawn and pale from hunger and cold. The air smells of smoke and sweat, and the muffled sounds of coughing and groaning ripple through the camp. It is hard to imagine that this tattered, suffering army could ever take the fight to the mighty British forces again. The soldiers are exhausted, many barely able to hold their weapons steady. The winter has already claimed its toll, a toll of sickness, despair, and fatigue. Yet in Washington's heart there burns an undying flame of resolve. He knows that this moment, though harsh, is not the end. It is a crucible, a test of endurance, of strength, and of character. Washington has led his men through countless battles and challenges, but now, faced with the harshest conditions yet, he faces the greatest test of all, his ability to keep his army together, to inspire them to keep fighting even when the odds seem impossible. The camp is filled with the constant low murmur of soldiers making do with what little they have. Rations are low and many of the soldiers are clothed in rags, their boots worn thin from months of marching. The suffering is pervasive. Some soldiers are sick, others are too weak to stand, and the morale of the army is at its lowest point. Yet Washington does not falter. His leadership is not just a matter of military command. It is about maintaining the spirit of his men, about reminding them why they are here, why they are fighting. As he walks through the camp, Washington speaks to his men. His voice is calm and steady, though his heart is heavy with the weight of their suffering. He tells them that this is but a season, a test of their will, and that though the winter may be long and cold, it will pass, and with it their strength will be renewed. His words are simple, but they are enough. Slowly he begins to see the change in the men around him. Their eyes, once dull with despair, begin to spark with the fire of resolve. It is not just the promise of victory that keeps them going, but the unwavering belief that their cause is just. They are not simply fighting for their lives, they are fighting for the future of a nation. The days at Valley Forge stretch on, each one as harsh as the last. Washington spends long hours working with his officers, coordinating with the local population for supplies, and organizing what training they can manage in the midst of the cold. Baron von Steuben, a Prussian officer who has come to the aid of the Continental Army, begins to drill the soldiers in the art of warfare, teaching them how to move as a cohesive unit, how to hold their ground. The drills are grueling, and many of the men, worn from the hardships of winter, find it difficult to push through. Yet with each passing day they become stronger, more disciplined, more united in their purpose. The army, once fragmented and disorganized, begins to take shape under von Steuben's tutelage. Their movements become more fluid, their responses more immediate. But even as the soldiers grow in strength, the cold continues to bite, the hunger continues to gnaw at their bellies, and the fear of what lies ahead continues to haunt their every step. Washington himself feels the weight of their suffering, the weight of the burden he carries as their leader. He knows that this winter will leave scars, and that not all of his men will make it through. The fort weighs heavily on him, but it is a weight he will bear with resolve. He will not abandon them. As the months drag on, a faint sense of hope begins to stir in the camp. The first signs of spring begin to show, a subtle shift in the air, a quiet promise that the worst of the winter has passed. With the changing of the seasons comes the promise of new strength. Washington can feel the change in his men. Their bodies may still be weary, but their spirits are stronger. They are no longer just an army struggling to survive. They are a fighting force tempered by hardship, bound together by a common cause. The siege of Valley Forge is not just a physical battle. It is a battle for the soul of the Continental Army. Washington's leadership, his ability to keep his men united despite the harshest of circumstances, is what keeps them moving forward. He knows that they are not just fighting for their own freedom, but for the future of their country, for the freedom of those who will come after them. Every day spent at Valley Forge, every hardship endured, strengthens the bond between Washington and his men, and it strengthens the bond between the soldiers themselves. Together, they will endure the trials of the revolution. And when the spring thaw finally arrives, when the snow melts and the trees begin to bloom again, the Continental Army emerges from Valley Forge stronger than ever before. They are no longer the ragtag group of volunteers they once were. They are a cohesive, battle-hardened force, ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. Washington knows that the war is far from over, but for the first time in a long while, he can see the light at the end of the tunnel. The revolution, though still fragile, has a future, and that future, he knows, will be shaped by the courage, resilience, and sacrifice of the men who have stood with him through the darkest of times. The summer sun blazes fiercely across the fields of New York, casting long, sharp shadows on the land, that has become the stage for one of the most pivotal moments of the American Revolution. The air is thick with the scent of earth and muskets, and the landscape, though beautiful, is now marred by the sounds of battle. In the distance, the rumble of cannon fire can be heard, a constant reminder that this conflict is far from over. The Continental Army, battered but determined, faces off against the seasoned British forces under General John Burgoyne, who has come south from Canada with a plan to split the colonies and strike a decisive blow to the rebellion. But the odds, once again, are against Washington's forces. His army is depleted, his resources stretched thin, and yet there is something in the air. A sense of resolve, a belief that this battle could be the one that turns the tide in favor of independence. At the heart of the struggle stands General Horatio Gates, one of Washington's key commanders, who is determined to lead his men to victory. The Continental Army, though inexperienced, is bolstered by a series of strategic moves that will shape the outcome of this battle. Gates, with his sharp military mind, has prepared for this moment for months, carefully watching the British movements, anticipating their strategy, and positioning his men in such a way that would make a direct confrontation favorable. However, the real strength of the American forces comes not from their tactics alone, but from their resilience, the knowledge that they are not just fighting for survival, but for a future they have yet to fully see. The British forces, confident in their superiority, are initially unaware of the strength of the American resolve. General Burgoyne, accustomed to the smooth, efficient methods of European warfare, is unprepared for the guerrilla tactics employed by the Americans. The British, though well trained and equipped, find themselves fighting a different kind of war, one where every movement is scrutinized, every step countered by an army that knows the terrain and the stakes better than their enemy. The Continental Army may not have the same experience, but they have something far greater, the unyielding will to win, to preserve their freedom at any cost. The battle at Saratoga begins with a clash of arms, the thunderous roar of cannon fire shaking the earth beneath their feet. The sky is thick with the acrid smoke of gunpowder, and the sound of men shouting orders and urging their comrades forward is deafening. The battle rages for days, with the Americans holding their ground, despite the overwhelming force of the British troops. Gates, though a relatively cautious general, pushes his men to fight harder, to dig in and hold their positions. They know that victory here could change everything, not just for them, but for the future of their fledgling nation. As the days pass, the American forces slowly begin to wear down the British troops. They are relentless in their pursuit, exploiting every weakness, every vulnerability in the British lines. Burgoyne's forces, stretched thin and increasingly isolated, are forced into a retreat, unable to break the American defenses. The British attempt to regroup, but they are met with the unrelenting tide of the Continental Army, determined to secure their victory. The final blow comes when Burgoyne, seeing no way to win, is forced to surrender. His troops, exhausted and demoralized, lay down their arms, and the American forces claim a resounding victory. The Battle of Saratoga becomes a turning point in the Revolution, the moment when the tide shifts in favor of the Americans. The victory is not just a military success, but a psychological one. It proves to both the Americans and the world that they are not just a collection of colonies rebelling against their oppressors. They are a force to be reckoned with. For Washington, who has spent months rallying his forces, strategizing and overseeing the army's growth, the victory at Saratoga is a moment of triumph. Though he was not directly involved in the battle, the victory reverberates throughout the Continental Army and the wider world. The news of the American victory reaches Europe, and it is here that the true significance of Saratoga becomes clear. The French, long sympathetic to the American cause, see the victory as proof that the Americans can win this war. This victory opens the door to a formal alliance with France, a crucial turning point in the war, as France provides not only resources, but a critical military presence to support the American struggle for independence. As the news of the victory spreads through the American colonies, the morale of the troops is lifted. The months of hardship, the winter at Valley Forge, the long exhausting marches, and the constant threat of defeat seem a little less daunting now. They have proved their strength, their courage, and their resolve. The Continental Army, once a disjointed group of volunteers, is now a professional force, and their victory at Saratoga is a testament to their growth. For Washington, the success at Saratoga is a reminder of the power of perseverance. It is a victory that proves that, even in the face of adversity, the American cause is worth fighting for. The road ahead will still be long and fraught with challenges, but Saratoga shows them that victory is possible, that they are not just fighting for survival, but for a future where they can govern themselves, free from the tyranny of foreign rule. The Battle of Saratoga is not just a military victory, it is a symbol of the potential of the American Revolution, the spark that will ignite the fire of independence across the globe. The year is 1781, and the American Revolution has stretched far longer than any had expected. The days of optimism following the victory at Saratoga have long passed, replaced by the harsh reality of war. The Continental Army, battered and weary, continues to fight, its strength drawn from a deep well of determination and the unwavering belief in the cause. But the end is still distant. Washington, standing at the head of his army, knows that they are nearing the final chapter of this war, though the road to victory is still uncertain. The British forces, led by General Cornwallis, have entrenched themselves in the southern colonies, and it is there that the final confrontation will take place. The scene at Yorktown, a small town on the Virginia coast, is one of quiet anticipation. The air is heavy with humidity, the scent of salt water mixing with the dust of battle. Washington and his French allies, led by General Rochambeau, have gathered their forces in secret, planning the final blow to strike down Cornwallis and bring an end to the war. The French fleet, commanded by Admiral de Grasse, has blocked the British Navy from escaping by sea, and now Washington's army, reinforced by thousands of French soldiers, is prepared to launch a siege that will be the decisive action of the war. The town of Yorktown, nestled along the banks of the York River, is surrounded by thick, dense forests and winding paths, which Washington knows all too well. He surveys the area with a keen eye, calculating every move, every position. His strategy is clear. The British forces must be encircled and cut off from escape. Their lines must be weakened, and their defenses slowly chipped away until they have no choice but to surrender. The key is patience, and Washington, ever the tactician, knows that they must be careful, disciplined, and most importantly, unified. The men who stand under Washington's command are not the same men who fought in the early days of the Revolution. They have endured years of hardship, through countless defeats and victories, through hunger, sickness, and the unrelenting pressure of war. They have learned to fight as one, to rely on each other in ways they had never imagined when they first began this journey. And now, as they prepare to lay siege to Yorktown, they do so with the understanding that this battle may be their last chance to secure the freedom they have longed for. The British, for their part, are not unaware of the American and French forces closing in on them. General Cornwallis, though a skilled commander, has been stretched thin by the multiple fronts he must manage, and the British forces at Yorktown are not as strong as they once were. His soldiers, weary from years of fighting in foreign lands, are ready for an end to the conflict. But Cornwallis, ever the soldier, does not easily yield. He knows that to surrender now would mean the fall of his army, and a crushing defeat for the British crown. The siege begins with a slow, steady march of American and French troops toward the British lines. The days of cannon fire and musket volleys grow longer, the air thick with the sounds of battle. Washington, despite the ongoing violence, maintains his usual calm demeanor, his eyes focused on the objective ahead. He knows that victory is within their grasp, but he also knows that the price of this final push will be high. Each day that passes means more casualties, more blood spilled on both sides. And yet, there is no turning back. For the Continental Army, this is the moment they have fought for, the moment when they can finally achieve the freedom they have long dreamed of. As the days drag on, the siege tightens. Washington, along with Rochambeau, carefully oversees the positioning of the artillery, ensuring that every shot counts. The British fortifications begin to weaken, their supply lines stretched thin. The French fleet continues to blockade the British Navy, ensuring that Cornwallis has no way to escape by sea. The British soldiers, once proud and confident, begin to show signs of fatigue and desperation. Their food and supplies run low, and the constant bombardment from the American and French forces takes its toll. Finally, after weeks of relentless fighting, Cornwallis has no choice but to admit defeat. On October 19, 1781, with the British forces surrounded and with no hope of reinforcements, Cornwallis surrenders to Washington. The terms are agreed upon, and the soldiers, both American and British, lower their weapons. The moment is heavy with significance. The war that has torn through the American colonies, the war that has defined the lives of so many, is coming to an end. For Washington and his army, it is a moment of triumph. They have fought for years, suffered unimaginable losses, and sacrificed more than they ever thought possible. But in that moment of surrender, when Cornwallis's army lays down their arms, the dream of independence is finally within reach. The road has been long, but victory is now theirs. As the British soldiers march away from the field, Washington stands tall, his heart full of pride and relief. The American Revolution, which has cost so much and taken so long, has finally come to an end. But even as the celebrations begin, Washington knows that this victory is not just his own. It is the victory of every man who has fought for the cause, the victory of every person who believed in the dream of a free and independent nation. The sacrifices of the past have borne fruit, and the birth of the United States is no longer a distant dream, but a reality that will live on for generations to come. The dust has barely settled on the battlefield of Yorktown, but the echoes of victory reverberate across the land. The Continental Army, once ragged and weary, now stands victorious, their triumph securing the independence they have fought so fiercely for. Yet, as the British Army retreats, the reality of the future settles heavily in the hearts of all who fought for this moment. The battle was won, but the war for freedom is not over. There is still much to be done to ensure that the promises of the revolution are fulfilled. The challenge now is to turn the victory on the battlefield into a lasting peace and a new nation. The negotiations to secure this peace are delicate, fraught with uncertainty. The British, though defeated, are reluctant to acknowledge the independence of the United States. Their pride, wounded by the loss of a colony that had once been the jewel of their empire, makes them hesitant to sign any treaty that would formalize the new nation's sovereignty. But Washington, his heart swelling with pride for the army that has carried him through the trials of war, knows that the final battle is not fought with guns, but with diplomacy. He cannot afford to let his hard-won victory slip away at the negotiating table. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, marks the official end of the American Revolution. The treaty, which is negotiated by John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay, grants the United States full recognition as an independent nation. The British agree to relinquish all claims to the land between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River, and the Americans gain access to the rich territories that had once been part of the British Empire. The treaty also ensures that the United States will have the right to fish off the coast of Canada, a crucial provision for the nation's economy. For Washington, the signing of the treaty is both a relief and a moment of quiet reflection. The war is over, but the challenges of building a new nation are just beginning. The nation he fought for is still fragile, and the road ahead will not be easy. The divisions within the colonies, the differing visions for the future of the nation, and the political rivalries that have begun to emerge all threaten to undermine the very foundation of the Republic. Washington, ever the leader, knows that the strength of the nation will depend on its ability to remain united, to put aside personal ambitions for the common good. As the treaty is signed, Washington's thoughts turn to the future of the country. He knows that the war for independence has created a new kind of bond among the American people, one that transcends geography, culture, and social class. But this bond must be nurtured, strengthened, and protected. Washington has always been a man of action, but in these final years of his public life, he will face a new kind of challenge, one that requires patience, diplomacy, and a steady hand. In the months following the signing of the treaty, Washington's role as leader of the newly formed nation becomes more clear. Though he has no desire for power or titles, his reputation as a military leader and his unwavering commitment to the cause make him the natural choice to serve as the nation's first president. Washington, however, is reluctant. He knows the burdens that come with the office, and he feels the weight of the responsibility that it carries. But his sense of duty, his love for the country he helped create, pushes him forward. When Washington is finally sworn in as the first president of the United States, he does so not with the grandeur of a monarch, but with the humility of a servant. He knows that the presidency is not a crown to be worn, but a responsibility to be borne. The eyes of the world are upon him, and the future of a new nation rests on his shoulders. But Washington, true to his nature, approaches the office with the same resolve that carried him through the darkest days of the Revolution. He is not here to build a personal legacy, but to serve the country he loves, and to ensure that the freedoms fought for by so many are preserved for future generations. The inauguration is a quiet affair, marked by a simple oath of office. Washington's voice, steady and resolute, rings out as he takes the oath, his words reverberating with the weight of history. The future of the United States has begun, and though there are many challenges ahead, the first steps toward a nation built on the principles of liberty, justice, and equality have been taken. Washington stands as a symbol of hope and determination, a man who, despite his own reservations, will guide this fledgling nation into its next phase of growth and development. As Washington looks out over the crowd gathered to witness this moment, he feels a quiet sense of pride and accomplishment. The revolution is over, but the work of building a nation has just begun. There are many challenges ahead: the drafting of the Constitution, the establishment of a functioning government, the creation of laws that will ensure the protection of individual freedoms. But in this moment, as he stands as the first president of the United States, Washington knows that the dream of a free nation is no longer a distant hope, but a living reality. The crisp, fall air sweeps across the streets of New York City, the temporary capital of the fledgling United States. The city, still feeling the aftershocks of the revolution, is filled with a mix of bustling activity and quiet anticipation. On the steps of Federal Hall, George Washington stands, the first president of the United States, ready to embark on a journey that will shape the course of a new nation. The weight of history presses down on him, but there is also a sense of excitement in the air. This is not just the beginning of a new administration, but the start of an entirely new chapter for a country that has fought and struggled for its very survival. Washington, despite his immense popularity and the respect he commands, is deeply aware of the enormity of the task before him. He had led an army to victory, but now he must lead a nation, navigating the complex web of politics, economy, and international relations that will define the future of the United States. The nation is still fragile, its institutions not yet fully formed, and Washington knows that his actions will set the tone for the presidency for years, if not centuries, to come. As he walks into the newly constructed offices of the presidency, Washington reflects on the monumental task ahead. The country, though united in its desire for freedom, is divided in its approach to governance. The question of how to structure the new government, how to balance power between the states and the federal government, how to create a fair system of taxation, how to establish the United States' place in the world, is still open for debate. The Constitution, which had been so hard won, is just a blueprint. Now, it is Washington's responsibility to turn that blueprint into a functioning government. Washington's first year in office is marked by uncertainty and trial. He faces opposition from different political factions, notably from those who favor a stronger central government and those who wish to preserve states' rights. The birth of political parties, though not yet fully realized, begins to take shape, and Washington, though averse to party politics, finds himself in the midst of this growing divide. On one side, Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, advocates for a strong federal government, a national bank, and policies that will stabilize the country's economy. On the other side, Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State, champions the rights of the states and fears that too much centralized power will lead to tyranny. Washington, ever the careful leader, listens to both sides, weighing their arguments and seeking to find a middle ground. He understands that the fledgling government cannot survive if it is constantly at war with itself, but he also knows that compromise will not come easily. He is forced to make decisions that will define the future of the United States, many of which will be controversial and divisive. Despite the tensions, Washington strives to maintain unity, always reminding those around him that the goal is the preservation of the Republic, not personal power. One of Washington's early and most significant decisions is the establishment of the executive departments, which will form the backbone of the federal government. He appoints trusted allies to key positions: Hamilton as Treasury Secretary, Jefferson as Secretary of State, Henry Knox as Secretary of War, and Edmund Randolph as Attorney General. Together, these men form the core of Washington's cabinet, advising him on matters of national importance and helping to shape the policies of the new government. Washington values their opinions, but he is careful not to allow any one person or faction to dominate the decision-making process. Despite the progress made in organizing the government, Washington's first year is not without challenges. The financial situation of the nation is dire, with debt from the Revolutionary War still hanging over the country. Hamilton, as Treasury Secretary, proposes a plan to consolidate the debt and establish a national bank, which is met with resistance from those who fear it will give too much power to the federal government. Washington, after careful consideration, supports Hamilton's plan, believing that a strong economy is crucial to the survival of the United States. The decision is controversial, but it ultimately lays the foundation for the nation's financial system. At the same time, Washington faces the reality of foreign relations. The United States, though victorious in its war for independence, is still vulnerable on the global stage. The British, though they have formally recognized American independence, continue to hold territory in Canada and maintain strong influence in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, the French, who had been crucial allies during the Revolution, are embroiled in their own revolution, and Washington must navigate the delicate balance of maintaining good relations with both powers. The French Revolution in particular presents a dilemma, as some Americans see it as an extension of their own fight for liberty, while others fear the chaos and violence it brings. As Washington works to establish the nation's foreign policy, he is faced with a difficult decision: how to handle the ongoing conflict between Britain and France. Washington, ever the pragmatist, understands that the United States cannot afford to get involved in foreign wars. He issues a proclamation of neutrality, hoping to avoid entangling the young nation in European conflicts. This decision is unpopular with many, particularly those who sympathize with the French cause, but Washington's resolve remains firm. He knows that the survival of the United States depends on its ability to remain independent, both politically and militarily. As Washington's first year draws to a close, he reflects on the challenges he has faced and the progress that has been made. The nation is still fragile, and the road ahead is long, but Washington is confident that the foundation has been laid. The principles of liberty, justice, and unity are enshrined in the Constitution, and it is now up to the government he has helped create to uphold those ideals. He is not blind to the difficulties ahead, but he is resolute in his belief that the United States can succeed, that this new experiment in self-government can endure. The first year of Washington's presidency is a testament to his strength, his leadership, and his dedication to the American cause. It is a year marked by challenges, but also by significant achievements. Washington has laid the groundwork for a nation that will grow into a global power. And though he knows that the road ahead will be difficult, he is steadfast in his belief that the United States will one day thrive as a beacon of freedom and democracy in the world. The sun sets over the Potomac River, casting a warm golden hue across the land. The peaceful flow of the water mirrors the calm resolve in George Washington's heart. But underneath this tranquility, there is a sense of finality in the air. For the first time in his presidency, Washington stands at the threshold of an uncertain future, one where his leadership will soon no longer be required. His 2 terms have come to an end, and the weight of a nation's future presses upon him. He has served the fledgling republic with unwavering dedication, but now it is time to step aside, to return to the life he once knew, a life that no longer seems possible in the world of public service. Over the years, Washington has borne the burden of leadership with grace and resilience. But as he reflects on the nation he helped create, the responsibility of guiding it into the future fills him with both pride and concern. He knows that the young country is still fragile, its future uncertain. It is not enough for him to leave office. He must ensure that the foundation of the republic he helped build remains strong, that it endures long after he is gone. The memory of the revolution, the sacrifices made, and the struggles endured still linger in his mind. The thought of what comes next, a new generation of leaders, a nation growing and evolving, brings both hope and trepidation. The time has come for Washington to deliver his farewell address, a moment that will become one of the most defining speeches in American history. In the stillness of his study, as the sun sets and the quiet of the evening settles in, Washington puts pen to paper. The words come slowly, carefully. He knows that this address will be his final act as president, and he wants his message to resonate, not just with the men and women of his time, but with generations yet unborn. In the address, Washington urges the nation to remain united, to put aside the differences that threaten to divide them. He speaks of the importance of a strong federal government, one that can provide stability and guide the country through the challenges ahead. But more than that, he warns against the dangers of political factions. The rise of political parties, he believes, will only lead to division, strife, and the weakening of the republic. Washington's concern is clear. A divided nation will never endure. The country, he argues, must prioritize the common good over partisan interests. Unity, he believes, is the key to the nation's survival. The address also reflects Washington's deep belief in the principles of neutrality in foreign affairs. He urges the United States to avoid entangling alliances with foreign powers, particularly the European nations embroiled in their own conflicts. America, Washington argues, should not allow itself to be drawn into wars that are not its own. The nation must stand strong, independent, and free from foreign influence, so that it can focus on its own growth and prosperity. He reminds the people of the importance of protecting the republic, safeguarding the liberties they fought so hard to achieve, and ensuring that future generations are able to carry the torch of freedom. As he writes, Washington's mind drifts to the early days of the Revolution, to the struggle, the hardship, and the ultimate triumph of independence. The thought of the nation that now exists, though imperfect, is a source of quiet pride. He has lived through the greatest challenges a nation can face, and in the end has helped forge a republic that will stand as a beacon of freedom to the world. And yet, as he prepares to step down, he knows that the real work is only just beginning. His presidency may be over, but the future of the nation rests in the hands of those who come after him. The farewell address is not just a reflection on the past, it is a vision for the future. Washington calls on the American people to remain vigilant in their defense of liberty, to be steadfast in their commitment to the ideals that have guided the nation. The republic, he argues, must be nurtured, protected, and preserved. It is a responsibility that will fall to the next generation of leaders, but it is also a responsibility shared by every citizen of the United States. As Washington finishes his address, he reflects on the profound responsibility he has carried for 8 years. The country is no longer the fragile collection of colonies that it once was, but a strong, independent nation with a future full of promise. Yet he knows that the journey ahead will not be easy. The path to prosperity will be fraught with challenges, both internal and external. But Washington has faith in the strength of the American people, in their ability to rise above their differences and build a nation that is worthy of the sacrifices made during the Revolution. The next morning, Washington delivers his farewell address to the nation. His voice, steady and firm, carries the weight of his years in office, his thoughts, and his hopes for the future. The people listen, rapt and respectful, knowing that this is the end of an era. The words of the farewell address resonate deeply, shaping the future course of the nation and laying the groundwork for generations of leaders to follow. As Washington leaves the presidency, he retreats to his beloved Mount Vernon, where he can finally rest, knowing that the republic he fought so hard to create is in safe hands. His legacy, though still in its early stages, is already firmly established. The vision he set forth in his farewell address, of unity, of peace, of independence, will guide the nation for years to come. Washington's decision to step down from the presidency, to relinquish power for the good of the republic, becomes one of the most significant acts of his life and one of the most important examples of leadership in American history. The rolling hills of Mount Vernon, bathed in the soft golden light of the morning sun, seem to hold the quiet echoes of history. The mansion, once the stage for grand meetings and the weighty decisions of a new republic, now stands in peaceful solitude, as if at rest, much like its owner. George Washington, now retired from public life, walks slowly through the gardens, his hands resting gently on the cane that supports him. The years of leading a fledgling nation, of shouldering the immense burden of leadership, have left their marks on him. His once sturdy frame is now frail, his gait slower than it once was. Yet there is a serenity in his steps, a peace that comes from knowing the future of the nation he helped to create is now in capable hands. As he walks the familiar paths of his estate, Washington often finds himself reflecting on the long and difficult journey that has brought him here, to this quiet life, far from the tumult of politics and war. The weight of the presidency, the struggles of the revolution, the countless decisions that shaped the nation all seem distant now. The echoes of those days, the cries of victory at Saratoga, the anguish of Valley Forge, the sense of hope as the Treaty of Paris was signed, are now just memories. But they are memories that Washington holds dear, for they are the very foundation of the Republic that stands strong today. He knows that his time in office was but one chapter in the story of the United States, but it is a chapter that has shaped the very essence of the country. The Republic he envisioned, a nation built on the principles of liberty, justice, and equality, is still in its infancy. The challenges are many, and the future remains uncertain. But Washington feels a quiet pride in the accomplishments of those first years. He sees the United States as a beacon of hope for the world, a nation that has defied the odds to create something new and unprecedented. It is a republic, yes, but it is also a symbol of freedom, a symbol of democracy, a symbol of the possibilities that lie ahead. Yet, even as he enjoys the peace of his retirement, Washington is not blind to the challenges that lie ahead. The country is still divided, its political landscape volatile, and the Constitution, though a powerful document, is not yet fully tested. Washington's decision to step down from the presidency, though celebrated, is also one that leaves behind a vacuum of leadership. The presidency, now a symbol of the highest office in the land, will be filled by others, but none will ever carry the weight of the first presidency in the same way he did. Washington's retirement is not without its own challenges. Though he is no longer in office, he remains deeply concerned about the future of the country. His letters to friends and colleagues reflect his continuing sense of duty, his deep desire to ensure that the Republic endures. He watches with concern as political factions begin to take shape, as the lines between the Federalists and the Republicans grow clearer, and as the debate over the direction of the nation intensifies. Washington's vision for a united, nonpartisan republic is at odds with the rise of party politics, and he is troubled by the divisiveness that seems to be taking root. He believes that party divisions, if left unchecked, will lead to the undoing of the nation he helped to build. Despite these concerns, Washington remains hopeful. He believes in the strength of the American people, in their commitment to liberty and justice. He trusts that the institutions he helped to establish, the presidency, the Constitution, the courts, will endure. But he also knows that the nation must continue to evolve, to adapt, and to find new leaders who will carry the torch forward. It is a future Washington will not see, but one he has worked tirelessly to secure. As the years pass, Washington's health continues to decline. His body, once strong and capable, is now frail, worn down by the years of public service. But his mind remains sharp, his commitment to the nation unwavering. He spends his days at Mount Vernon, surrounded by family and friends, but always with one eye on the world beyond. He reads the papers, listens to the news, and offers advice to those who seek it. Though he no longer plays an active role in the nation's politics, he is content in his own way to have given all he could to the Republic, and to have seen it through its most formative years. In the winter of 1799, Washington falls ill. His illness, though swift, is a reminder of the toll that time has taken on him. He is surrounded by his loved ones, and in his final hours he remains calm, accepting of the fate that has come for him. His death, though expected, marks the end of an era. The nation mourns the loss of its first president, the man who led them through the revolution and established the foundations of their government. His funeral is a somber occasion, attended by the very people he served so selflessly. The nation, though young and fragile, stands united in grief. Washington is laid to rest at Mount Vernon, the place he had always considered home. Though Washington's physical presence is gone, his legacy endures. The United States, though still in its early stages, has become a symbol of freedom and democracy, and his influence is felt in every corner of the Republic. The nation he helped to create is not perfect, but it is built on the ideals of liberty, justice, and the pursuit of happiness, ideals that Washington embodied throughout his life. His commitment to unity, to the preservation of the Republic, and to the principles of the Constitution continue to guide the country in the years that follow. His legacy, though rooted in the past, is woven into the fabric of the present and the future. The years have passed since George Washington's death, but the country he helped build is far from the quiet republic he envisioned. Instead, the United States, still a young and fragile nation, continues to evolve. The framework that Washington established has weathered its first tests, and though the nation stands firm, it is still growing into its full potential. The story of America, a story shaped by Washington's resolve, is far from over. It is a story still being written, one where every challenge is met with the spirit of those who fought, worked, and sacrificed to create a land of liberty. As the 19th century unfolds, the United States is a beacon of hope in a world still divided by monarchies and empires. The ideals Washington championed, liberty, democracy, and self-governance, continue to resonate across the globe. The influence of his leadership, his vision for a nation free from tyranny, is woven into the fabric of American identity. Yet, the challenges that lie ahead are monumental. The nation faces internal divisions, political strife, and the ever-present question of how to balance freedom with order. Washington's absence is deeply felt, but his legacy remains the compass by which the country navigates its future. At the heart of Washington's legacy is the presidency. The office he helped shape has now become the cornerstone of American democracy, an institution that will endure long after the first president is gone. The power of the presidency, however, is not absolute. Washington set the precedent for a system of checks and balances where no one branch of government could dominate the others. The presidency, under Washington's guidance, is a symbol of unity and strength, but it is also a symbol of restraint. The quiet wisdom that guided Washington through his 2 terms continues to influence the office and the men who succeed him. Yet, the nation he built faces growing pains. The 2-party system, which Washington warned against in his farewell address, is now fully entrenched. The Federalists and Democratic Republicans, led by figures like Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, battle for control of the nation's direction. Washington's vision of a united government, free from the corrosive influence of political factions, begins to fade as partisanship takes root in the halls of power. The question of how to maintain unity amid such division becomes central to the American experience. Despite these challenges, Washington's impact on the presidency and the American political system is undeniable. Every president that follows will carry with them the lessons of Washington's leadership, not just in terms of policy, but in how they approach the responsibilities of office. Washington's humility, his willingness to step down after 2 terms, sets a precedent for peaceful transitions of power, something that remains a hallmark of American democracy. It is in his refusal to seek more power, in his decision to place the nation's needs above his own, that Washington's true legacy is found. His presidency was not a monarchy, it was the birth of a democratic system that would endure for centuries. As the years go by, the United States faces the test of nationhood. The nation's westward expansion and the growth of industry bring new challenges. The question of slavery, an issue Washington himself wrestled with, becomes a source of deep moral and political division. Yet, the ideals Washington upheld, that all men are created equal and have the right to liberty, continue to drive the nation toward change, even as the road to that change is fraught with conflict. The American Revolution, which Washington helped to win, is no longer just a struggle for independence from Britain. It is a revolution that must continue within, as the nation grapples with its own contradictions. Washington's vision of a nation that respects individual freedoms and the rights of all its citizens has not been fully realized. But his example serves as a constant reminder that the work of perfecting the Republic is never truly done. His belief in the importance of education, in the cultivation of character, and in the idea that leadership must be guided by principle rather than personal ambition, continues to resonate in the country's evolving political landscape. As the United States moves into the 19th century, the world looks on. The young nation is still finding its place on the global stage, but it is a force to be reckoned with. The principles Washington set forth, that a government can and should be of the people, by the people, and for the people, continue to inspire movements for freedom around the world. The United States is no longer just a republic. It is a beacon of hope, a symbol of democracy's potential. Though Washington is no longer alive to witness the changes that unfold, his spirit lives on. His name is immortalized not just in the monuments that bear his likeness, but in the very ideals that continue to guide the nation he helped create. His leadership, his sense of duty, his unwavering belief in the promise of a free and just society are woven into the fabric of the United States. His legacy, though shaped by the events of his time, continues to shape the future of the country, reminding each generation of the sacrifices made to build this republic and the responsibility that comes with it. The morning mist lingers over the rolling hills of the new nation, the air still damp from the early morning dew. As the first rays of sunlight begin to break through the clouds, the fledgling United States finds itself at a crossroads. The revolutionary fervor that had once united the colonies in their fight for independence now gives way to the complexities of governance. The foundations laid by George Washington are solid, but the task of building a functional government is far from complete. The nation stands united in its desire for freedom, but it is divided on how to sustain that freedom and what kind of government will best serve its citizens. In the years following Washington's presidency, the political landscape begins to shift dramatically. The Federalist and Democratic Republican parties, initially born out of differing views on the strength of the federal government, grow more distinct and more polarized. The sense of unity that Washington worked so hard to cultivate seems to be slipping away. The ideal of a unified republic, free from the divisiveness of political factions, feels increasingly elusive. The emergence of party politics, a phenomenon Washington had warned against in his farewell address, takes root more firmly, challenging the ideals of unity that were central to the American experiment. The new president, John Adams, finds himself caught between the two factions, trying to navigate the turbulence of early American politics. Adams, a staunch Federalist, believes in a strong central government to ensure the stability of the nation. He fears that without such authority, the Republic could descend into chaos, but he is also wary of the potential for tyranny. The rise of political parties, once a vague concern, is now an undeniable force, and Adams is forced to confront the growing schism within the country. The divisions grow clearer as the country faces external threats as well. The French Revolution, with its violent upheaval and radical ideology, casts a shadow over American politics. Many Americans sympathize with the French people, seeing their revolution as an extension of their own fight for liberty. But others, particularly the Federalists, fear the chaos that has enveloped France and worry that supporting the revolution could draw the United States into an unnecessary war. Adams, caught between these competing pressures, makes the difficult decision to avoid military involvement with France, a move that angers many of his fellow citizens but ultimately helps to preserve the fragile peace that the young nation so desperately needs. In the midst of these political battles, the nation faces its own internal struggles. The issue of slavery, though not fully addressed, continues to simmer beneath the surface, creating deep rifts in American society. The question of whether slavery will be allowed to continue in the southern states, or whether the nation will take a stand for freedom and equality, becomes more pressing with each passing year. Washington himself, though deeply conflicted over the institution of slavery, had left behind a legacy that did not resolve this moral dilemma, and his successors are left to grapple with its implications. The issue will, of course, come to a head in the decades to come, but for now it remains a difficult and unresolved part of the nation's identity. Despite these challenges, there is still hope for the nation's future. The establishment of a national bank, spearheaded by Alexander Hamilton, provides a stabilizing force for the economy, and the creation of the Bill of Rights ensures that the fundamental liberties of the people are protected. These victories, though hard won, give the nation the framework it needs to move forward, even as the political divisions threaten to tear it apart. As the country continues to mature, the lessons of Washington's leadership resonate more deeply. The commitment to a peaceful transfer of power, to the principles of democracy, and to the ideal of a government that answers to the people rather than the other way around remain at the core of the American experiment. Even as political parties rise and divide, the underlying belief that power ultimately lies with the people continues to hold the nation together. Washington's absence is felt more acutely during these years of struggle. His steady hand, his wisdom, and his unwavering belief in the cause of liberty had provided the nation with a model of leadership that was unmatched. But even as the country falters, his influence remains present, not in his direct actions, but in the example he set for those who follow him. The American Republic, still fragile and young, draws strength from the ideals Washington embodied: unity, sacrifice, and a steadfast commitment to the common good. As the decade draws to a close, the United States finds itself at a crossroads. The future is uncertain, and the path forward will not be easy. The political divisions are deep, and the country faces both internal and external challenges. But the lessons of the past, the sacrifices made during the Revolution, the wisdom of the Founding Fathers, and the ideals that have driven the nation forward, continue to serve as a guide. The road to unity is long, and the struggles are far from over, but the spirit of the American people remains strong, and the vision of a free republic endures. As the dawn of the 19th century breaks over the horizon, the United States stands at a pivotal moment in its young history. The echoes of George Washington's leadership still resonate through the nation's heart, but the world is changing, and the nation must change with it. The ideals of freedom and liberty that Washington so carefully nurtured are now being tested in ways he could not have imagined when he first led the Continental Army to victory. The questions of unity, identity, and purpose that he confronted are now being shaped by a new generation of leaders, citizens, and challengers. In the years since Washington's departure from office, the nation has grown in both size and complexity. The Louisiana Purchase has nearly doubled the size of the United States, and the nation's borders stretch further and further into uncharted territory. Expansion is a double-edged sword, bringing new opportunities and wealth, but also new tensions and disputes, especially over the contentious issue of slavery, which continues to divide the nation. The acquisition of land creates new challenges for both the government and its citizens. How to govern this vast expanse, how to integrate new states, and how to reconcile the growing divide between the North and South. The question of what kind of nation the United States should become looms large, and the answers are not easy. Political factions now solidified into distinct parties, battle for control of the government and the direction of policy. The Federalists, once the dominant force under Washington and Adams, give way to the rising power of the Democratic Republicans, led by figures like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Their vision for the nation, though rooted in the principles of liberty and equality, differs greatly from that of the Federalists. Jefferson in particular advocates for a more decentralized government, one that gives greater power to the states and limits the influence of the federal government. His election as the third president marks a shift in American political thought, one that will have profound effects on the future of the Republic. Yet despite the shifting political winds, there remains a fundamental commitment to the ideals of Washington. The idea that power ultimately belongs to the people, that the government should be of, by, and for the people, remains at the heart of the American experiment. Washington's decision to step down after 2 terms, his belief in the peaceful transfer of power, sets a standard that all future presidents will be measured against. His legacy, more than just the creation of a nation, is the preservation of the democratic principles upon which the Republic was founded. As the nation moves into the 19th century, it is clear that the path forward will not be easy. The United States faces internal challenges, political divisions, economic struggles, and the growing tensions between North and South over the issue of slavery. But it also faces external pressures. European powers continue to vie for influence in the Western Hemisphere, and the young nation must navigate a complex world of diplomacy and conflict. Washington's vision of neutrality in foreign affairs will continue to guide the United States, though the temptation to involve itself in European conflicts will persist throughout the century. The nation is also evolving socially. The ideals of freedom and equality enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are being challenged and reinterpreted as the country expands. The institution of slavery, which Washington himself grappled with, remains a stain on the Republic, its moral and political implications growing more urgent with each passing year. The question of whether slavery should be allowed to continue, whether the United States can truly live up to its ideals of freedom and equality, will not be answered in Washington's lifetime. But his commitment to liberty and his struggles to define what it means to be free will continue to shape the debates for generations to come. And yet, Washington's legacy is undeniable. It is etched not just in the buildings that bear his name, or in the statues that commemorate his contributions, but in the very fabric of the republic he helped create. The United States is not perfect, far from it, but it is a nation built on the belief that freedom, equality, and democracy are worth fighting for. It is a nation that, despite its imperfections, continues to strive toward a more perfect union, a union where the ideals of liberty and justice are constantly being tested, refined, and expanded. As Washington's story fades into history, the story of the United States continues. His vision of a nation that is strong, united, and committed to the principles of democracy remains alive in the hearts of its people. The road ahead is uncertain, but the legacy of George Washington, his leadership, his sacrifices, his unwavering belief in the promise of freedom, continues to guide the nation he helped to birth. His life may have ended, but the republic he created lives on, a testament to the power of the ideals that shaped it.